The world of curses and sorcery, Jujutsu Kaisen, is back with a new season, exploring the shrouded past of Gojo Satoru, unveiling the dark secrets of Jujutsu High, and much more. Let's dive right into this action-packed thriller about old friendships, new enemies, and unimaginable powers. The first episode begins with Ghetto walking into a dark alleyway, talking about the unprecedented increase in cursed spirits popping up. Ghetto goes over his awful routine, which involves exorcising and absorbing cursed spirits, as he does it in real time, explaining how revolting absorbing a cursed spirit is, comparing it to swallowing a dirty rag that had been used to clean up vomit and pee. Ghetto then goes on about continuing to save lives as a Jujutsu sorcerer, despite having realized the ugliness of people, or so he's been telling himself ever since that day, referring to the disaster that led to the current cursed spirit epidemic. Utahime and Mei head to a haunted mansion that once belonged to a wealthy restaurateur, who ended his and his family's lives in it last year, after his chain of restaurants collapsed from the spread of mad cow disease, and he got buried under mountains of debt. Now, it's being used as a test of courage attraction by students and job hoppers. Mei acknowledges the seriousness of the matter by mentioning that the HQ was willing to pay her hefty fees for this. As the two arrive at the mansion, Utahime starts putting up a veil outside, but Mei tells her there's no need, since the spirit is inside. Mei opens the door to the dilapidated mansion, and as the two enter, they both feel the presence of the cursed spirit all around them. Mei then tells Utahime to take the second floor, while she looks around at the first. All by myself? The frightened Utahime asks Mei. Mei then basically pulls a "what, you scared or something?" which works, and Utahime agrees. Utahime, though still trembling in fear, checks all the rooms on the second floor and finally reaches the last one. As she creeps up the suspicious-looking bed and flashes her flashlight underneath it, she finds something even more terrifying than cursed spirits and runs outside, muffling her scream, which she lets out when Mei puts her hand on her shoulder. Utahime then asks Mei if she had finished checking the first floor already, but gets shocked when Mei tells her this was the first floor. Pointing out some things and marks she had left, Mei tells Utahime she had already passed all these 3 times in the hallway, implying they were already in the belly of the beast. In other words, the spirit's barrier, which was an endless loop of the hallway. Mei then quizzes Utahime about how she would break through this. Utahime figures out that the spirit was connecting the spaces randomly one after the other, when she noticed that the distance between each mark Mei left was different each time she passed it. And so, if they ran down the hallway fast enough, the spirit would not be able to keep up, and the barrier would break. Mei tells Utahime she's 90% right, and that the only thing she missed was that they would have to run in opposite directions. The two do just that, and the mansion starts distorting and breaking apart behind Utahime all of a sudden. The rubble then starts floating into the sky and collapses. As Utahime crawls out of the rubble on top of her, a young high schooler, Gojo, stands there, telling them he had arrived to help them. As Gojo teases Utahime, she yells at him to mind his own business and that she doesn't need his help when a giant cursed spirit appears behind her, but gets quickly engulfed by Geto's giant worm-like spirit. Irritated by her 2 annoying juniors, Utahime is elated when Ghetto arrives, but is shocked to learn that she and Mei had been inside the mansion for 2 days, because the spirit's barrier was the type that messes with time. Meanwhile, Mei realizes she would be paid double for 2 days of labor. Back in the school, Gojo gets disciplined with a solid fist to the dome by the then-teacher, Principal Yaga, for running ahead of his supervisor and volunteering to put up the veil, but not doing so. When Gojo questions the need to put up veils in the first place, Ghetto reminds him it's the best way to keep the population mentally calm, which is the best deterrent to cursed spirits. As Gojo complains about how exhausting protecting the weak is, Ghetto tells him that Jujutsu exists to protect non-Jujutsu sorcerers. But Gojo rejects Ghetto's philosophy by saying assigning responsibility to strength is something only the weak would do, while nailing a half-court shot with ease. Shoko, knowing better than to stay and get caught in the chaos about to ensue, runs for it as the two are about to go at it when Yaga shows up and announces a mission for them. The mission, assigned to them specifically by Tengen-sama, had 2 goals: to escort and erase the Star Plasma vessel. As the two joke about the not yet a Principal Yaga, going senile, Ghetto asks Yaga if this was related to renewing Tengen-sama's technique. Yaga explains that the Tengen-sama cursed technique of immortality begins rewriting his body after he reaches a certain age, and will cause his evolution into a higher form of existence. While Gojo thinks that would be pretty cool, Ghetto tells him that reaching that point eliminates his will, which would mean the Jujutsu schools, and countless other things would no longer be strengthened by his power. Or worst case scenario, he could himself become a threat to humanity, which is why every 500 years he assimilates a star plasma vessel, resetting his curse technique in the process. Yaga continues that the star plasma vessel's location had been leaked, and currently 2 groups were after her life. Gojo and Ghetto's mission is to protect her, till she gets assimilated with Tengen. Upon Gojo's asking, Ghetto tells him the star religious group were after the vessel, because they didn't want an impurity like her to blend into Tengen. Ghetto tells Gojo they probably don't need to worry about them, because they are a non-sorcerer group and should instead be wary of Q. As Ghetto makes the mistake of trying to get Gojo to stop being so arrogant and become more humble, he is welcomed by an explosion at the hotel room where the vessel was supposed to be. He survives, however, thanks to his spirit slaves, and immediately goes after the vessel that had been blasted away from the explosion. Both boys are met by combatants from the Q group, and while they are engaged with them, elsewhere, we see a representative from the Star Religious Group offering someone who he refers to as a Zenin, the Star Vessel's assassination job, at the promise of a good payday. The man corrects him and tells him he's no longer a Zenin, and was now a Fushiguro after taking his wife's name, but agrees to take up the job. The next day, Ghetto calmly makes tea for himself, having captured the Q combatant and secured the hostages. While the captured combatant warns Ghetto about Bayer, the strongest Q combatant, a photo from Gojo of the so-called strongest combatant laid out on the ground shuts him up, eventually leading to the collapse of the organization Q. On the other hand, Fushiguro is gambling on horse racing when the mediator for Star Religious Group shows up again. After making fun of Fushiguro's terrible luck at gambling, he asks him about the job. Fushiguro tells him he hired some people to wear down Gojo first, because just popping up on him directly wouldn't work. Fushiguro tells him that he spent the deposit on this, but expects all his money to return to him just like this race, which he proceeds to lose. Before leaving, the mediator asks the sorcerer killer Fushiguro about his son Megumi, but Fushiguro can't seem to remember who he's asking about at all. As Gojo and Ghetto talk about how they could never understand the reversed curse technique from Shoko's wacky explanations, Riko wakes up. Finding herself in the arms of a strange white-haired man, she immediately slaps Gojo and takes the stance of an angry cat. As Ghetto tries to explain to her how they mean no harm to her, she insults his bangs, leading to the two wringing her out like wet clothes. Her caretaker, Kuroi, then pops in riding on one of Ghetto's spirit slaves and tells her they're their allies. As Riko blabs on about how she'll be Tengen-sama, and Tengen-sama will be her after the assimilation, Gojo and Ghetto seem more interested in Gojo's new wallpaper. Riko then remembers she had school and insists on going right away. On the phone with Professor Yaga, Gojo doesn't see why they don't take her to Jujutsu High instead, as it'd be safer. Yaga tells him it's an order from Tengen-sama to fulfill Riko's every wish before her assimilation. Ghetto tries to get Gojo on board as well, by telling him about her sacrifice, and how everything and everyone she knew till this point, very soon she will never see again. Kuroi tells them Riko lost her parents at a young age, and she's all the family she has left, so she wanted Riko to spend her last moments happy with her friends. Gojo asks Ghetto about how his cursed spirits he sent to watch over Riko were doing, when Ghetto tells Gojo to immediately head over to Riko, as 2 of his spirits had already been exorcised. As the 3 dash over to Riko's school, Kuroi tells Gojo and Ghetto that she's most likely taking her music class right now or in the chapel. The 3 split up to look for her faster. Fushiguro is on the phone with the mediator from earlier, who tells him the trio didn't return to Jujutsu High. Fushiguro is glad to hear that, because now reasonable fools would be drawn in for the bounty he placed on Riko. The mediator asks Fushiguro if he's fine with this, as he could lose all his 30 million deposit money if one of them actually captures her. But Fushiguro remains confident because they would have to take out Gojo, the first child born with both 6 eyes and the limitless technique in centuries, in order to accomplish that. As the mediator asks Fushiguro if not even he could take out Gojo, Fushiguro teases the question with a "who knows?" as the speedboat racer he bet on starts winning, implying he had a devious plan for that very purpose. Fushiguro tells the mediator to leave the bounty up for another 47 hours and hints at another reason for putting up the time limit on the bounty, on top of the bounty hunters flocking in a rush for it. Ghetto rushes to where he sensed his spirits last when he encounters an old Shinigami user. The old man recognizes Ghetto to be a curse manipulator. The old Shinigami user thinks Ghetto wouldn't step forth himself, and would avoid close combat at all costs, and labels it his weakness he could exploit. In that instant, Ghetto summons his giant worm spirit again and attacks the old Shinigami user. Thinking it's over, Ghetto decides to find the rest of the unknown assailants, when the old man suddenly breaks through a window behind him, catching Ghetto off guard. But before he could land his finishing strike, the old man starts seeing his old dog Tasuke from 50 years back, who was the only one who would give him company when everyone else shunned him for being able to see spirits. The old man then realizes his life was actually flashing before his eyes, as we see him get pummeled with a barrage of strikes by Ghetto. As Ghetto asks the man about his association with Q, Gojo reaches the chapel where Riko was currently. The girls from Riko's class start screaming in excitement over the gorgeous Gojo's arrival, who doesn't mind basking in some of it.
Oh my.
Riko's teacher quiets the class down and approaches Gojo, giving him an earful about bargaining in a class like that, only to slip him her number. As the class erupts into chaos, Gojo uses this chance to grab Riko and take her away. The two head to Jujutsu High, but are in the sights of another bounty hunter wanting a piece of that big bounty. But before he could do that, Kuroi shows up with a broom and an expression that reads, "Hands off my little girl." Kuroi pulls out some ravishing broom moves on him and lands a decisive blow on his family jewels to drop him.
My time has come.
Ghetto shows up and, with his spirits, restrains the bounty hunter, and the two decide to head over to the school where Gojo and Riko were heading when the bounty hunter suddenly melts away. On the other hand, the same bounty hunter has Gojo surrounded while Ghetto tells him about the bounty.
Wait a minute!
Gojo then smashes two of the clones together, and when the rest try to attack Gojo, their punches get stopped right before reaching him, thanks to Gojo's technique called Infinity. Gojo then breaks down the bounty hunter's technique and figures out that the real body is hiding in a safe location elsewhere. When the bounty hunter asks Gojo about how he did that, Gojo explains it's because of his eyes. Furthermore, elaborating about his infinity technique that slows everything approaching him more and more, and his limitless attraction technique that allows everything to be sucked towards a space like earlier. As the bounty hunter scurries the scene, Gojo is right on top of him in the next instant and uses his revered technique, Red, but fails to do so and just punches him instead. As Gojo bums over not being able to perform his reversed curse technique yet, Riko, who had been carried by Gojo like a shopping bag all this time, receives a message about Kuroi being kidnapped. If you have watched the video this far, comment JJK, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video to all JJK fans. For more fun recaps, stay connected with One and One Endless Recaps.